Once upon a time, when the world was not so very much younger than it is now, there was a boy named Kyriakos. Kyriakos lived in a little village in Greece with his mother and his old grandfather. They and their neighbors worked hard all day in the fields. Kyriakos liked pets. He was on the best of terms with half the barnyard animals in the village. He had a goat of his own named Aspasia, and a dog named... Kyriakos had hopes of getting one, or at least a mule, because he knew the Marshall Plan was sending lots of them from America to Greece. Months before, a committee had met in the village, and Kyriakos' grandfather had gone down along with a lot of others. Each one in turn was given a chance to explain to the committee how much he needed an animal to help with his work. Those whose need was judged greatest were to have their names put on a list, and in time they would get their animals. Kyriakos' grandfather was picked, among others, and his name was written down, but then nothing had happened. Grandfather had had a feeling from the very beginning that the whole thing was too good to be true, so after a while he had just dismissed it from his mind. But not Kyriakos. Was true. There was grandfather's name all written out in plain sight. He and 3 other men from the village were to have mules all the way from America. Miles away in KAVALA, the nearest port, a ship was docked at that very moment, though Kyriakos, of course, didn't know it. The ship had already begun to discharge its cargo. Hundreds of mules from Missouri and Arkansas, from Texas and Oklahoma and Mississippi. Aboard ship, the captain and some American officials were going through the formalities of turning over the cargo to the Greek government. Unloading the mules was a long, hard task for the dock hands. American mules are not at all like the docile little donkeys most people in Greece are used to. They are as big and powerful as horses and much harder to handle. And these particular mules were at their very worst after the long trip across the ocean and the frightening process of unloading. unloaded, the mules were shipped off in big trucks to different places for distribution. Those for Kyriakos village, along with many others, set out for Xanthi, where the men of the village were to go and claim them on the day appointed. By dawn of the great day, Kyriakos' mother and sister were up and about, getting the men ready for their journey, for Xanthi was many miles away. Kyriakos could hardly contain himself because grandfather had consented to let him go along. The trip promised to be a great adventure. The men would not be back for at least 2 days, and hardly anyone in the family had ever been that far away from home before. When they reached Xanthi next day, the sun was already high in the sky. Kyriakos had never seen such a big city. He would have liked to spend hours just walking the streets, looking at the shops filled with all manner of things. In the big enclosure where the mules were tied up, grandfather left Kyriakos to go see about the papers to be filled out. Kyriakos had been told to stay right there, but one look at the mules, so different from anything he had ever seen, and Kyriakos forgot his instructions completely. The more he looked at those strange big animals, the more he liked them. And there stood one in particular. He knew it at a glance. Its name could only be Koula. The big, powerful mules looked anything but reassuring to the farmers who were going to have to handle them. And when Kyriakos pointed out Koula, grandfather was not at all sure but what this beast looked even bigger and more skittish than the others. The choice of mules was not up to grandfather or any of the other men. Every one was to draw his mule by lot. From a hat filled with slips of paper, each man in turn was to take out a slip, and the mule whose number was written on it was to be his. Grandfather's turn was fourth. Kyriakos held his breath as the drawing began. The first man drew. It was not Koula's number. The second man, 7209. Koula was gone. Kyriakos had never wanted anything so much in all his life, but there was nothing he could do but watch Koula being led away. If Kyriakos could do nothing, however, there were those who could. Were all good-hearted men and sorry for Kyriakos. And besides, the one who had drawn Koula was none too pleased with such a spirited animal. So exchanging slips was the work of a moment or two. just imagine how Kyriakos felt when he found out. Everything was not perfect for Kyriakos, though. Grandfather insisted on taking charge of Koula himself on the grounds that so dangerous an animal should not be entrusted to a boy. Still, there was Koula. So the men of the village at last had their animals, and they should have been very happy. But they were not. For once, Kyriakos' way with animals seemed to have failed him. He was at his wit's end. Then suddenly he had an idea. An idea not soon to be forgotten in the village. Kyriakos had decided that Koula was just lonesome. What he wanted was some company, a more experienced friend to help show him what to do. It was a delicate situation. Koula liked it very much, but his little teammate was not quite so sure. Things were still not going quite right, but by now Kyriakos knew that he had regained his touch. So the plowing went well after all, and up and down the countryside, as farmers learned to handle their new American mules, their lives became just a little easier. Their farms became just a little more productive, and Greece itself became just a little happier land to live in.